When I was 11 years old, I used to listen to opera all the time for hours. And my parents used to wonder why I would do that. Why did I love that? Well, I don't speak Italian, I don't speak French, but you see that music soared and it gave me the feeling of freedom that I have carried throughout my life. It gave me power, it made me imagine worlds, and to see something so creative, so powerful, was just something I carried throughout my life. You see, I grew up in the middle of a civil war in Bogotá, Colombia, and when you are surrounded by death and kidnapping and bombings and violence, suffering is all that you can see. You cannot imagine much, but that's where the imagination comes in, and you can see a better future. And art is that embodiment of the better future that you can imagine for yourself. Clay is one of the most ancient art forms in the world. Every culture practices it and has continued with it, and it's one of the most unique ways in which cultures have kept it. Every culture has it. We have to believe that clay has that power. So what I started doing with clay is I realized, well, I'm an artist, but what you don't know is that I am also a lawyer. As you can imagine, I spend a lot of time teaching my clients and their communities about their rights. Immigrants don't know what their rights are. Immigrants, and even if they do, they don't know how to exercise them because they are afraid to do so. There are over 12 million immigrants living in the shadows, bearing some fear that their lives could be potentially shattered at the sound of every siren. They carry so much fear. How could I get them to come out of hiding so that I could teach them the rights that are rightfully theirs? Art and freedom, that's what I realized, and that's when I created Touching Land. Touching Land is my nonprofit, where through experiential arts, we're able to teach immigrants their rights through clay. And what I discovered is that when you are using your hands in this beautiful, touching, grounding way, while you're learning something that is very stressful to you, you are able to just relax, and you can even deepen the ability to open up and connect. You see, the name Touching Land comes from a student whom within minutes after touching clay said, "The last time I felt land, I felt clay this way, was when I crossed the border barefoot." From that revelation, I said, why not bring in US citizens so that we can deepen the conversation and we can connect on a deeper level? Because you see, when we build things together, we are able to break those barriers. We're able to go beyond and connect on a human level. And one of the most important things and aspects of making this work is that immigrants need to be visible in spaces where they're not, like a beautifully gorgeous lit studio like Brooklyn Clay, where I teach my classes. And not in a stereotypical way. I didn't want immigrants to just be the cleaning lady, right? We wanted them to be visible and to connect, be making art next to each other. That's how we break those barriers. That's how they become visible. I have taught hundreds of immigrants how to defend themselves and how to claim those rights that are rightfully theirs, because being invisible is something absolutely horrible, especially dangerous to immigrants. Because when you want to take away humanity from people, the first thing you do is you take away their freedom, you take away their hope, you take away books, you take away art, you take away their children, and you take away touch. See, touch is very important, and you take that away. I spend a lot of time volunteering, doing pro bono work down in detention centers along the border. And I have been beyond horrified by the conditions in which immigrants are being held especially children. So I want you for a moment to put your hands around you like this, and I want you to imagine that you are a 6-year-old girl from Guatemala. You are cold, you are scared, you don't know what is happening. I want you to squeeze even tighter and imagine that your mama is holding you and telling you that everything is going to be okay, that she loves you. I can't touch the children when they're inside and I'm representing them. So this is a theatrical technique that I have to use when they're sobbing, wanting their parents. So being invisible and not being seen is so dangerous that I wanted them to feel seen. So I started bringing into detention centers hope and beauty and art in the form of a card made by New York City children. And the reason for the card is because children are, we're not able to bring anything in besides this card, through security, of course. I was a first-year law student when I met my first invisible person. I was sitting across an alleged murderer in Oklahoma County Jail, and I was petrified, of course. And I remembered I had an origami in my pocket, so I put it in my hand, I held out my hands like this, and I said, choose a hand. And by chance, he chose the hand that had the origami. And we laughed at the absurdity of the situation, and we have been friends ever since. And in that moment, Carlos was no longer invisible. You see, Carlos is sitting in death row right now. He hasn't seen the sun or felt the warmth of the wind or been fed a warm meal. He is sitting there. He hasn't been touched in over 15 years. But he's able to feel the warmth of my children's voices when he talks to them on the phone, and he is able to feel freedom when he makes these embroideries for my children. He is able to connect with the world and see beyond his circumstances, because art gives us context and meaning. It makes him no longer invisible and able to be seen out there in the world. This embroideries mean so much more to him, and that's the power of art. We break cages, we break walls, and even those walls that are real and imagined. We have a lot of imagined walls. There are walls everywhere. Earlier this year, in New York Design Week, we had this amazing collaboration of clay, and we invited a group of moms with special needs children to come and work with the clay and imagine a playground however they wanted, but they had to design it, they had to build it, they had to put it all together. Fast forward to today, and these women, warriors, are now organizing and making sure that their city council members are behind them, and they have this playground for their children. That is the power of art, where that simple act was able to make them so powerful to see beyond the possibilities of what they could be, made action, and it brought change. I have so many stories of transformation that I could share with you. Laura, immigrants, came to the class, connected with community, and finally left her abusive husband. Or the story of a Guatemalan indigenous woman that lives in a smaller area than this red dot and makes these amazing embroideries and worlds. That is how she is visible. Or the American citizen that felt so inspired by the immigrants she met that she started advocating in her neighborhood so that people were paying enough wages for those immigrants. You see, art is not a destination. Art is a journey. It is a bridge to hope. It is a bridge to possibility. It is a bridge that can break down those walls, and it can break down those wars that separate us. That 11-year-old girl listening to opera understood that art transcends centuries, it transcends languages, it transcends cages, and it can break all those barriers. I use art in order to build. I want to invite you to build what I do and why I call it touching land is because I know what it is like to be one of those people that are coming here and are tired, they are poor, huddled masses, yearning to touch land here and be free. Thank you.